Hi, everybody, and welcome once again to another episode of the Classic Universal Horror Podcast. I am your host, historian, and collector Jay Jennings, and every show we bring you something special, a report, an expose, a dossier on a film or an actor in the Universal horror genre from 1931 to 48. And always join me in this discussion, this conversation, is the one and the only Courtney Joyner, who is author, filmmaker extraordinaire. Hey, Court.
Hi. Beginning with Meet Frankenstein, the head of Universal was not pleased that Abbott and Costello were still there at the studio when it was bought by International.
Universal was suffering a loss with all the movies. They lacked
You,
their luster. They were losing money. That lore of the horror films, even all the other departments were kind of on the trends were down. They're moving in a new direction, and they were bought Court, right, and made a partners, Universal International, and
with
uh, and they
yeah, with
decided to salvage Abbott Costello, and some old horror actors were still on contract or they were on their way out. And as a kind of a goodbye, they unintentionally started the classic comedy horror franchises.
the thing is, Cheney is a little confusing because he was very good friends with Lou Costello and talked many times about the fact that Costello was a huge 16 millimeter collector, and Lon would go to Lou's house and borrow movies for the weekend. So, and there are all those behind the scenes pictures of them together. And don't forget, before Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, Cheney had been in Here Come the Coeds. So they knew each other, they were friendly. And this idea of meeting the monsters actually originated in when they were thinking about doing it as a stage show. Of course, the main thing that they always loved to emphasize was Lou Costello's fraidy cat takes, no matter what it was and who done it or, whatever the previous films were. Hold That Ghost had been one of their most successful movies. And so they wanted Universal, when International came in, which was J. Arthur Rank, uh, they were starting to commit to movies like Laurence Olivier's Hamlet, which cost a fortune and did not make any money. And which, by the way, Peter Cushing is in that film. So they're looking at, we have to do something. Let's resurrect this idea of the stage show, whatever. And they had Robert Lees write a script called The Brain of Frankenstein, which Lou Costello hated and said so in no uncertain terms over and over and over again to producer Robert Arthur and other people involved. And they brought in their old standby, John Grant, who had been with them since the burlesque days, to add the gags and the jokes and the one-liners and things, including you and 20 million other guys. And, Lou really, with all the effort that went into this movie, and by the way, is one thing, Jay, that's pretty amazing, is Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein did not have a big budget, and that movie looks fantastic, thanks to Charles Van Enger's photography. And
Right. Let's take a look at the poster or the insert.
oh, I love that! I love that poster. And but that's the thing, who convinced Lou Costello that it was really good, and it was before the incredible box office and saving Universal from bankruptcy and all the rest of that stuff, because Universal was always teetering on the financial edge, was Lou's mother. She loved it and told him so, and suddenly he loved it too.
But the first one, I think, was the granddaddy of them all, and that's Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. We were talking about that. And I'm going to show some photos from it. Court's going to give us some background after well, you know how Count Dracula is partnered with Sandra, Dr. Mornay, in order to find a brain reactivate the Frankenstein monster's brain. And of course, who's that going to be? But Wilbur Gray, Sandra. So it was developed for them, but they had misgivings about the script. They're professional. This was the first time horror and them would be put together. Kind of, they're throwing away the monsters with them, even though it's been voted like number 56 court on the AFI's funniest American movies of all time. It goes beyond horror. It's all genres, all languages. It's just no matter who sees it, it's hilarious. It's always on someone's top 25 list. But it's all about a prank and making pranks. A prank called McDougal's House of Horrors, and then from there it just happens. The real monsters are there. They're wax figures, but Dracula's ring brings them, to life. And there's Larry Talbot, showing up. He was killed like 2 or 3 times, but here he is back again. The moon still turns him into a werewolf. And, the Chick and Wilbur working at a storage factory are hired to go pick up the monsters. And from there, I guess hilarity ensues, but they still retain that kind of 40s House of Dracula, House of Frankenstein kind of look, wouldn't you say, Court?
Oh yeah, and I should really have gone into the research. I've always been fascinated by the fact that they set the movie in Florida.
Right.
And, they're Chick and Wilbur at the, baggage express office, and Frank Ferguson, getting the 2 exhibits from Europe for his House of Horrors. And so Dracula has set all of this up, and which I think is great. He's really the mastermind, but Larry Talbot is the one who's trying to stop him. And there, poor Chick and Wilbur caught right in the middle. And of course, Wilbur is the ladies' man because he's got Lenore Aubert and Jane Randolph both chasing him.
This set the tone for all the subsequent movies of the horror comedy, the genre. The prank, the missed sign, thinking it means something else, the double entendre, Lou's thinking one way, Bud's thinking another way. They're now in the presence of old monsters from the classic Universal era, and it's just, we remember the set pieces, Court. It's the set pieces more than the films themselves. Even the opening credits, Court, are in kind of tongue-in-cheek horror with the skeleton bones. It starts as a cartoon, them creeping along, hey, Abbott. And then from there, there's 5 movies of Abbott Costello meeting monsters, in some way all related to Universal monsters, but the Meet Frankenstein was the first one. And we talked about who's in it. Lon Chaney Jr., Glenn Strange, Bela Lugosi, on and on. Of course, Lenore Aubert. But I think, the guy who stars in the film.
Once again, they were talking about Henry Victor and different people to play Dracula. I think really the prejudice against Lugosi that came forward with House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, and even Son of Dracula, which he was kind of sore about, was his age. And the makeup that Bud Westmore devised for Lugosi for the movie is absolutely ingenious, because it even plays into, I think, Dracula's own natural vanity. And everything is accentuated. And, he is obviously at times wearing makeup, but that's intentional. And I think that was a wonderful touch, and it certainly works very well for Bela Lugosi.
Right, and it works for everybody. He does some physical things. He climbs out of the coffin. He walks around. He puts Wilbur under a spell with his ring. He commands the monster. He gets Lenore Aubert on his side. As I said, it's a bunch of set pieces. Like, for example, when he meets the Wolfman, he's writing a letter, and there's the Wolfman. This is a terrifying scene. Lou Costello is facing death. But here, it's a comedy, and it's just, he keeps missing him. He pokes his head in. He doesn't see him. He thinks it's his friend. chick in a disguise. These are set pieces, Court. We remember these films almost 100 years later because of these cool 4 or 5 minute set pieces.
There's a wonderful contact sheet of Lon Chaney Jr. After the makeup was completed and he's in his correct outfit with the dark shirt and everything, but without his teeth. Wow, what a difference it makes in the shape of his face.
Right.
He's not wearing those teeth, and it's really kind of astonishing because when he put those in, just completely changed everything. And I must say that I actually got to, thanks to Ron Chaney, I got to try those teeth on, and they fit pretty well.
Very cool. As I said, one set piece after another. Where they see them, they see Glenn Strange for the first time. It's just they react as anybody would react. They try to mix horror with the comedy, and this is our version. And we tried. Laurel and Hardy had a couple, that Laurel and Hardy murder case in that mansion. There's been a few. Every comedy team tries to tackle a horror court, but this is better for nostalgia. As opposed to maybe back then. What do you think?
Well, also, let's not forget that Bob Hope did it twice with The Cat and the Canary and the Ghost Breakers.
Right.
And Olsen and Johnson had done Ghost Catchers for Universal, which I believe Lon Chaney is in. And so, there was kind of a tradition going all the way, back to silent movies. But Abbott and Costello, first of all, they had access to the Universal monsters. That's the thing. Those were copyrighted characters. They were part of the Universal legacy. And here's Abbott and Costello. Let's throw them together. And it just works so beautifully well. And the audience knows everybody in the movie. That's kind of the great fun of it. You're sitting down and you don't have to be introduced to these characters. You already know them. And you know what they're capable of. And you know they're scary and everything else. And you have no idea how Bud and Lou are going to react. Even, if you've seen the movie 300 times like I have, then it's always delightful, but you're going in with information. Let's just put it that way. When you go, okay, let's see how Bud and Lou react to the Frankenstein monster, because everybody knew who that was.
Right. It's this, as I said, Court, at this stage of the game, we remember the different set pieces, the dialogue.
Well, the thing is, too, with this movie, the success was so enormous. That's what lit the fuse because, Abbott and Costello weren't stupid. They had, business managers and agents, and even though they were, spending a lot of money at the track or whatever, and here I thought you understood the truth. But I don't think anyone was prepared for how enormous this movie was ended up being. And so, of course, naturally, let's bring in everybody else. And of course, too, the immediate follow-up to this movie had Boris Karloff in it. And Karloff had been kind of vocally critical of this film. The classic comment from him is they took the pictures of him outside the theater pointing to the one sheet. And he said, yes, I'll pose for the picture. I'll pose for the photograph.
As long as I don't have to sit through it.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
But I think a more fascinating story is how they originally evolved it to be Frankenstein's monster, Count Dracula, the Wolfman, and Kari's, and Count Alucard, and the Invisible Man. And I'm thinking to myself, whoa, where's that version? And forget about Abbott and Costello. Just make that film. That would be like the greatest horror film of all time. But of course, they always tone everything down, and they abandoned that idea. But you could look at this film left and right, as I said, as a comedy, as entertainment. It hits all the buttons for the time. If it was the Ritz Brothers meets, the Wolfman, don't know if it would have that same. It might have. It might be a cult film. You never know. But Anyway, so let's still talk about Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein. It's a historic court that I guess it's on the AFI top 100 films or something like that, and it goes beyond horror and it goes beyond language. If you're just going to review this as an all-time great, but the stories behind it, who they got to work on it, and who they got to work on the subsequent films, Court. But let's talk about this film. What do you think the allure is after all these years?
Well, the allure basically is that it's funny, and the thing is too. Um, and Lon Chaney made some kind of odd comments over the years about how they ruin the monsters and all this kind of stuff. But the horror scenes are played perfectly straight. That's what works in the movie. No one is making fun of them. I mean, there's the scene where Lou punches the Wolfman in the nose, but still, the threat of the Wolfman is real. And that great scene when he tears the chair apart, and all of these moments are terrific, and they're like, wow, that's like from a real horror movie. And the also too, we ought to point out, if anyone wants to take another look at this movie, look at what they snuck by the censors. Is pretty remarkable. Lenore Aubert has a line at the very top of the movie where Bud Abbott says to her that he doesn't understand why she's fooling around with Lou. And he says, I don't get it. And she says, and frankly, you never will. It's like, whoa. They snuck that one by. And later on in the film, and it's actually an error. If you remember, when she's trying to resist Dracula and she gets into a bit of a confrontation with him, this is before the costume party sequence, he bites her. You see them in the mirror. And apparently that was, as I understand it, a budget choice because the film was not made for much money. And they had John P. Fulton, those wonderful opticals looking into the eyes of Dracula, and you see the bats. And that was so terrific, but they had to make a choice. David Horsley and the special effects crew had to make a choice budget-wise as to what they could and couldn't do, and it would have cost too much money to remove Lugosi from the mirror because he's not supposed to cast any reflection. And yet it's a real little hot moment. Oh, Lenore really goes for it. It's pretty remarkable, actually. So there are all kinds of nice little hidden moments. And, Jay, you're looking at something here that resulted in a very serious injury for Glenn Strange, and with Lon Chaney taking over for him, as you know.
Right. That's as soon as from the cut from this shot, Lon puts on the makeup from behind, and he's the monster as he tosses Lenora Bear out the window. Classic
That's
scene.
right.
Yeah. So as I said, would you say out of all the, because at some point we're going to talk about the other four films. Let's not forget. I don't want to leave out this beautiful actress. Lou gets both Lenora Bear and Jane.
Yes, Jane Randolph. I'm Joan Raymond.
Glenn, great close up, and the fire burns him, and you think that the movie's over, and then they got the cameo by Vincent Price.
I have always felt that death scene for the Wolfman, where he leaps at the bat, that's Dracula's turned into the bat, and I think the transformation scenes are great. And then he goes tumbling off the balcony into the sea below. That is fantastic. Again, David Horsley, who was doing the special photographic effects for the film, he was terrific and was part of kind of the new group that was coming into Universal, or people being promoted because International wanted new folks behind the scenes on the movies.
So I enjoy it. I've seen it dozens of times growing up. It's an enjoyable film.
And if you wanted to see it at home, Let's see. Oops, got the wrong box. There it is. Okay. Now, I actually ordered this from the back of Famous Monsters of Filmland in like 1970. So there it is. The Castle Films 8mm edition. There we go.
Yep.
And interestingly, Castle used this same layout for The Bride of Frankenstein. So, save a little money. Now, later when Castle Films became Universal 8 and they did longer versions of the classic films and everything else and everything, then it was this version, which has sound. And, that was kind of, oh my gosh. Of course, this is all pre-videotape.
So this is our first review of an Abbott Costello Meet the Monsters movie. It was Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein, a classic, probably the best of all their monster movies, if not one of the best of their top 3 of their own films that they made. So, Court, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you. And,
So for Courtney Joyner, I'm Jay Jennings. Boris will take us out, and we'll see you next time on the Classic Universal Horror Podcast.
Thank you for joining us. Join us next time when we'll cover other topics like Universal Horror, Poverty Row, and profiles on people like Bela Lugosi, John Carradine, Peter Lorre, and even on myself. Until next time, stay scared.